Let's discuss 7 wide receivers who I believe are must-haves for this year in fantasy football. And we're going to start right here with Aaron Wilson, an NFL beat reporter for the Texans, because he talks about the wide receiver Tank Dell from the Texans looking fantastic in OTAs. Yes, OTAs have started. They've been going on for a few weeks now, and this is important because he's coming off not only a broken fibula, but being shot a month ago. And if you're familiar at all with his story, you know that last year as a third-round rookie, he was dang productive with CJ Stroud in this Houston offense. More specifically, Tank put up over 700 yards, which isn't the best, but then you factor in that he actually missed 6 games, so in just 11 games he did that, averaging 6.8 targets per contest with CJ Stroud, and CJ Stroud has basically gone out on air and said that Tank is his favorite receiver. But he wasn't just putting up numbers, he was also efficient. 14th in yards per route run, and coincidentally, he was also 14th in first downs per route run. And those two stats, they're efficiency stats, and they're pretty sticky. They're pretty good at showing you moving forward if this player will be good or not, and he did this right away as a rookie. It's probably only going to get better. Now, despite all this, Tank Dell's going as the wide receiver 30 in drafts this year, even though he finished top 20 last year, and there's one big reason for this. It's Stefon Diggs was traded to the Houston Texans. As you can see right here, their starting wide receivers are now going to be Stefon Diggs, Nico Collins, and Tank Dell, so the question becomes, when there's only 2 wide receivers on the field, who are those guys going to be? Most likely Nico Collins, and then it's going to be a battle between Tank Dell and Stefon Diggs for that other wide receiver spot, which is where the issue comes in as to why Dell is falling a little bit. A lot of people believe that these 2 guys are going to be on the field the most, Stefon Diggs and Nico Collins. And maybe that's the case. Even then, I think you're getting a value on Dell, but what happens if Dell actually pushes Stefon Diggs for some or even all of those snaps at some point in the season? Because like I said, CJ Stroud has basically gone out and said Tank Dell's his favorite target during an appearance on the Micah Parsons podcast, listing him as one of his 3 starting wide receivers if he could pick any of them in the entire NFL. He didn't pick Nico Collins or Stefon Diggs. And Tank Dell is already getting multiple teammates to come out and say that they want him to have the captain, the C patch this year, which if you're talking about his skills and then his leadership, it's going to be hard to keep a guy like that off the field. And it's also worth noting that Dell last year only played 66% of the snaps. It's not like he played 85-90% of the snaps and now he's going to lose a bunch of that usage. No, he was basically a part-time player, or 2/3 of the time, not out there on a lot of 2 wide receiver sets early on in the year last season. So it's not too much different with Stefon Diggs there. The obvious objection would be that Diggs is going to earn a lot more targets than, say, like a Noah Brown. And I get that, but it's just hard for me to kind of go against this up-and-coming young player when in his final 2 years of college, he puts up 1,300 yards each of those 2 years, then enters the NFL and right away is looking dynamic in all levels of the field, especially downfield against solid NFL cornerbacks in his rookie year. And not to mention, Stefon Diggs last year, these were his efficiency numbers, 31st overall, which is not terrible, but this is an aging receiver and his efficiency has fallen off now each of the past 2 seasons, and last year his season was probably the worst he's had in almost 10 years. And yes, the coaching change, the offensive coaching change with Buffalo might have hurt Stefon Diggs' upside last year since they changed the offense and his role, but he's still an aging receiver and still was not as productive on a per route basis. So basically at his current ADP is going as the 59th overall player. I'm 5 spots higher in the fantasy blueprint. He's my 54th overall player. I like drafting him right now in this range of like the 5th or 6th round, and I'm just taking the cheapest wide receiver attached to CJ Stroud, and he also happens to be my favorite. Now let's move from an AFC team to an NFC team where this next guy is rising on a lot of drafts right now. And that man's name is Drake London with the Atlanta Falcons, who was a massive offseason winner for a few reasons. The obvious one, well, Kirk Cousins was now signed to this team in Atlanta, and the other reason is they changed their coaching staff, which is going to be a benefit as well. Because Atlanta hired a new coach in Raheem Morris, and also the big one, they brought in Zach Robinson, a new offensive coordinator. And here's Zach Robinson's career. He was a quarterback himself in the NFL. He made it to the NFL. He played for about 3 years, and then you go here and he becomes a coach, and he coaches with the Rams under Sean McVay. He starts out as a quarterbacks coach, wide receivers coach, then he goes back to quarterbacks coach, and last year he was a passing game coordinator for the last 2 seasons with the Rams, and this is big because he helped fuel that Puka Nacua breakout. So I believe that Zach Robinson coming over from the Rams is going to give a boost to this offense that ranked dead last in passing last year. So the play calling might take a step forward, and then you get the quarterback play that's definitely going to be taking a step forward. He's coming off of Achilles, Kirk Cousins, which isn't great, of course, but he's not a mobile quarterback. That shouldn't be too much of an issue here. He was still last year on pace to lead the NFL in passing yards and be top 10 in wide receiver or quarterback efficiency and accuracy. And let's not forget how good Drake London is. He was compared to guys like Brandon Marshall coming out of college, but then his first 2 years in the league, he landed with bad quarterbacks like Desmond Ridder, Marcus Mariota, and a bad coach in terms of a passing game offense in Arthur Smith. But London is now in line to earn the most targets of his career and have his best season if he stays healthy. And look, everybody knows this. Right now, he's going 14th overall in drafts, depending on the site that you're playing on. He's mostly going in the top 20 in a lot of places and a top 10 overall receiver. And this might seem crazy to buy into Drake London because of that, and I completely get it, but he has a real chance to be a top 5 or even number 1 overall receiver if the things break right for him. Because these have been Kirk Cousins' wide receiver 1 overall finishes, courtesy of the OG Fantasy on Twitter. Last year, or 2022, when he had actually a healthy season, because last year Kirk Cousins was hurt, wide receiver 1, that's Justin Jefferson. 2021, wide receiver 4. 2020, wide receiver 6. 2019, wide receiver 24, and 2018 wide receiver 7 and a wide receiver 10. He had 2 of them, and these are guys like Stephon Diggs, Adam Thielen even in there at times, and Justin Jefferson. And just to kind of give you an idea of how bad it's been for Drake London, the last 2 years, he's played in an Atlanta offense that is ranked 31st and 25th in passing plays per game. And to make things even worse, last year they ranked 31st in neutral pass rate, so when the game was close, they were not passing the ball, and then when they were leading by 7+, they ranked dead last in pass rate, only running the ball. And now despite that, despite the team never passing in favorable situations for Drake London, he still had last year, as you can see right here, his cheat code targets, a courtesy of our fantasy blueprint, which you can get down below, has all the tools you need to help you win your league and your draft this year. Drake London had 19 deep targets, 15 red zone targets. That's 34 cheat code targets, which ranked top 15 amongst wide receivers last year. Imagine what's going to happen when he actually gets more usage. Might lead the league in red zone targets. Now, as for his competition, they did bring in Darnell Mooney, I think is a solid wide receiver 2 for this offense. Rondell Moore, not really a threat at all. And then everything behind that, I'm not really scared of, especially when it comes down to red zone usage. I mean, Darnell Mooney, a smaller receiver, Rondell Moore, a smaller receiver. None of these guys are going to compete with Drake London. None of the tight ends probably will either at that point. I know what people are going to say in Kyle Pitts. But Kyle Pitts has never been a priority target earner. Last season alone, Drake London ranked 20th in the NFL, earning a first read target share 29% of the time. So right away, the first guy the quarterback was looking at, it was Drake London about 30% of the time, 29%. Compared to Kyle Pitts, who ranked 65th in the NFL at 19% of the time. And this is supposed to be the number 2 option on the team, a guy who's going to threaten Drake London. I don't think they're even in the same ballpark. Because to me, Drake London is the only guy on this Falcons team who actually has the potential and ability and likelihood to earn an elite target share this year, and I am all in on him. He's a must-have. And as much as I like London, this next guy I might actually like more because you can get him much cheaper in drafts. And that man's name, as you can see in the fantasy blueprint at the top right here, is DK Metcalf. He currently goes as the 39th overall player in drafts, and just coincidentally, he's my 39th overall player. I think he's properly valued right now, but I think his ceiling creates a little bit more value than people are leading to believe. Because bear with me as we walk through this right now. Last year, DK Metcalf, only 57% of his targets were catchable. So over 40%, nearly 45% of his targets, 2 out of every 5, just not even worth even having a chance to catch them. They were nowhere near the target. I mean, the guy had 120 targets last year and only caught 66 balls. That's not because of him. That's because Geno Smith had a poor season during stretches last year. And then you factor in that he only had like an average touchdown year, just 8 touchdowns. It's a solid year, but for DK Metcalf, average when he has 12 and 10 seasons on his career. And despite that, despite not having an accurate quarterback for stretches last year, average touchdown season for himself, still finishes the wide receiver 22, which is basically where he's going right now in drafts, even though a lot of things have improved for him. Starting with the overall offense, likely going to take a step forward. Last year, Seattle ranked 17th in passing plays per game. And surprisingly enough, they were actually top 10 in neutral pass rate when the game was close. But once they got a lead, they dropped to 24th. Pete Carroll just decided to run the ball, but Pete Carroll is no longer there. They have a new head coach in Mike McDonald, but more importantly, a new offensive coordinator in Ryan Grubb. And if you're not familiar with Grubb, he coached in college the last 2 seasons at Washington, which was the number 3 overall graded offense last year, and they often used 3 wide receivers and just threw the ball everywhere. So this move should only help Geno Smith and all the pass catchers because it's going to lead to more downfield passing, hurry up offense, and more 3 wide receiver sets. And all of this is great for DK Metcalf, who's already a cheat code monster in his career, and now he's going to get even more downfield targets. Like we showed with Drake London, deep targets and red zone targets are your cheat codes. Now in 2022, he was top 5 in cheat code targets, and right here you can see from last year in the fantasy blueprint, he had 26 deep targets, 24 red zone, and 50 overall cheat code targets, one of only 7 players to do this, and now he might see even more downfield passing and a more efficient offense getting to the red zone a lot more. So I believe Metcalf, that he's going as the wide receiver 20 or later, is being drafted at his floor. There's a real chance where he could be a top 5 or a top 10 receiver this season. And I do know that the number one thing that people will push back against is that the wide receivers that he's going to be competing with. JSN coming into his second year, started to come on at the end of last year. Tyler Lockett has always been a target earner, and I agree. I like Tyler Lockett. I like JSN. I like all these Seattle receivers where they go because I think this team is just going to pass the ball a lot more, but nobody is as dominant at earning first read targets, the first priority in the offense, than DK Metcalf. Because Metcalf was the clear number 1 option last year for this team, earning a first read target share 28% of the time. His price as the wide receiver 23 is completely fair, and I think based on his ceiling, it's actually a little bit low. Next up, let's talk about a rookie, and I like this guy a lot right now. The Giants' number 1 receiver, and that is Malik Nabers, who's a massive value in drafts. You can see right here in the fantasy blueprint, he goes as the 48th overall player. I think this is a mistake. He goes in the 4th or 5th round. I am 17 spots higher. He's my 31st overall player. Completely fine taking him in the 3rd round of drafts, but I like that I can get him in the 4th or 5th. And this is the fantasy blueprint, by the way. This is just one of the tools. There's like 20 tools that'll be in this thing. This is just the top 250 overall players, comparing my rankings to ADP, so you can see where the best values and the worst values are, just one small piece of the puzzle. If you want to join thousands of other people currently using the blueprint this year, you can just scan the QR code on the screen or click the link in the description below to get it for a limited time, risk-free. Yes, risk-free. Now, if you're not familiar with Nabers, he was a top 5 overall pick in this year's NFL draft. He's only 20 years old and spent 3 seasons at LSU. LSU, where he was able to get on the field in his second season and he just balled out. 72 receptions, over 1,000 yards, and then in his final season last year, this was the massive breakout, 89 catches, over 1,500 yards with Jaden Daniels as his quarterback on that great LSU offense. And check out this quote from J.J. Zacharyason's late round prospect guide. Since 2011, just one first-round wide receiver entered the league under 21 years of age while hitting a max season yards per team pass attempt as high as Malik Nabers, and that person was Amari Cooper. So that's the type of players he's comparing to. Guys like Amari Cooper, and I've also heard Julio Jones out there, CeeDee Lamb. This dude is a freak, and now he has no competition on the Giants. Because his biggest target competition probably would be Darren Waller, but he's still contemplating retirement, has not showed up to OTAs. He's actually releasing music videos right now, so some things are going on right there. And then his biggest wide receiver competition right now, I mean, maybe it's Darius Slayton, you can say, but Darius Slayton hasn't attended OTAs. He's been doing a contract negotiation. Jalen Hyatt kind of wins in different areas downfield. Wan'Dale Robinson wins in different areas in the short parts of the field. So does Isaiah McKenzie. Allen Robinson, I didn't even know was on this team until like a week ago. Not really a threat at like 32, 33 years old. It's really just Malik Nabers going to earn a ton of targets. Obviously, other guys will earn targets, but I think Nabers as a rookie can easily earn 25 to 30% of this team's targets. Because all those other guys are limited in their role, where Malik Nabers can win in the slot, can win out wide, can win downfield, can win in the intermediate, can win with his route running and after the catch, and he did all this at LSU during those 2 seasons. Now, of course, the main concern is the QB situation, which it will be Daniel Jones, assuming that he's all back and ready and fine from his ACL, and then if not, it's even worse because it's Drew Lock. Obviously, this is not great. You get Daniel Jones, who has not been the most consistent and efficient and great quarterback at producing elite wide receivers. Basically, he was never reliable, and now he's coming off of an ACL, but he also never had the best situation, whether that was the offensive line or not having great pass catchers like Sterling Shepard and Darius Slayton being some of his best receivers that he's ever had is pretty sad. But here's the thing. I believe this is already baked into Malik Nabers' price tag. You can see right here. He's my wide receiver 19. I have him as a top 20 receiver. He currently goes in drafts as a wide receiver 25. He's in my tier 4. This is another piece of the fantasy blueprint. All of my tiers highlighted with the guys that I am ahead on value in green and below on based on the market in red. Just the best and worst values in my opinion. Nabers, this is already baked into his price. You have a bad quarterback, fine. He's still a top 20 option in my opinion because he just has no other targets. Even Devontae Adams has a bad quarterback, but he's competing with Jacoby Myers, who is shown to be successful, and maybe 2 quality tight ends in Brock Bowers and also Michael Mayer. And not to mention a guy like Devontae Adams is also aging. And to make matters even better, there's no other running backs who could take away targets. Saquon Barkley is gone. Guys like Devin Singletary in this backfield aren't going to earn a massive target share. Now, the offensive line is a concern for this team, but now Andrew Thomas, their tackle, is healthy, and they signed 2 starters in free agency. So basically, I think Nabers at his ADP as of right now is an absolute must. And to make matters even better, currently in OTAs, he's working with Hall of Famer Steve Smith, which should only help your game, of course. This isn't really all that impactful, but it's a nice thing to add on. So let's go from one team's wide receiver 1 to another team in the AFC's wide receiver 1. And yes, I believe Marquise Brown is the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes' #1 receiving option for 2024, and he's a highly skilled one at that. If you're paying attention to any of the OTA news, which if you follow me on Twitter, I update it with a thread pretty often, everything that you can see in there, Marquise Brown right now is having a massive connection with Patrick Mahomes, and then they're just all hanging out. It's Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Marquise Brown going to basketball games together, the Dallas Mavericks game in the Western Conference Finals. You can see other scenarios where Patrick Mahomes and Marquise Brown are off the field together. They seem to be good friends on and off the field, which is obviously a good thing. And look, outside of the obvious player in Tyreek Hill, who was the best wide receiver Patrick Mahomes has ever had, maybe Marquise Brown is the second best receiver. I mean, who are you going to argue? Sammy Watkins? You're going to argue Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Juju? No, I would actually say Marquise is more talented than all of those guys. Last season, Brown led the Cardinals with a 25% first read target share, which was higher than guys like Calvin Ridley, Jalen Waddle, Mark Andrews. Basically, 25% of the time his quarterback dropped back in Arizona looking his way. That's a good predictor of how good you are at getting open and trustworthiness, if that's even a word. Now, it's not like I think Marquise Brown's a top 10 receiver or anything, because he still has target competition. Travis Kelce is there. I think this team is going to be built more to run the ball. They have a first-round receiver they traded up for, and Xavier Worthy, but again, he's still a rookie. Rashee Rice, who was pretty great last year, top 10 in first read target share, earned a ton of targets, over 100 as a rookie, but he's probably going to be suspended 4 to 6+ games after multiple off-season incidents off the field, which were not great. And now Brown is getting an offensive upgrade, obviously. The Cardinals, they ranked 24th in passing offense last year. The Chiefs, number 3. And not only that, but Kansas City throws in all situations. They ranked 3rd in pass rate when up by 7 or more. They ranked 5th in neutral pass rate when the game was close, and number 1 in pass rate when trailing. Now, veteran switching teams can always be a concern. Does their production drop off? But Brown's already done that. He left in 2021 the Baltimore Ravens when he was having 100+ targets in back-to-back seasons, a career high 145 targets in 2021, and he goes to the Arizona Cardinals where this only continues. Over 100 targets. Over 100 targets. These probably would have been in the 120 range if he didn't miss last year 3 games and the year before that 5 games. Now, in my opinion, the biggest concern you can have here is if Xavier Worthy just blows away and becomes the wide receiver 1 on this team, which I really don't think is going to be the case. And number 2, the injury concerns for Marquise Brown. Because in 2022, he fractured his foot, and in 2023, he had a heel injury and missed 4 games. But here's the thing. As somebody who's had some foot injuries, the bones heal. It was a foot fracture. Assuming there was no dirt, nerve damage, which I couldn't find any reports of that anywhere. Once the bone is healed, it's healed. And the sore heel is muscle related. That would be healed by now. Look, these aren't hamstring injuries, things that could reoccur like a Christian Watson per se and just keep getting worse over time. So right now, give me Marquise Brown, who's in tier 7 of receivers for me, a top 40 receiver. I'm ahead of the market on him. Yes, the Chiefs' number 1 receiver is going as the wide receiver 40 in drafts. I love that all day long. And now let's go to a guy who's not a number 1 receiver, I don't believe, for this year, but he's pretty close, or at least he has been in the past, and he should see high volume. And that man's name is Chris Godwin of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who, look, he struggled last year, but it wasn't for a lack of earning volume. He was still earning volume, played in all 17 games, and he earned 131 targets, almost 8 targets per game in this Baker Mayfield Tampa Bay Bucs offense. Now, there was a couple issues for Godwin. First off, I don't think he was used properly, not used downfield at all, had the lowest ADOT, average depth of target of his career, and then he only had 2 receiving touchdowns in 17 games. That's not going to continue. He's only had 3 and 2 touchdowns the past 2 seasons. I think that's going to change. Imagine if he just had an average year of 5 or 6. Instead of finishing 34th at the position, he'd be closer to his previous years of like a top 15, top 20 overall finish. And look, last year he was still a priority target. He ranked 28th in the entire NFL in first downs per route run, which were ahead of guys like T. Higgins and Amari Cooper. And like I mentioned earlier, there's an argument that he was just not used properly. Right here, his slot snaps just 32% of the time in the slot. This was a massive drop of like 30% from his previous year when he was a top 20 receiver and had more success in this offense. And now heading into this year, we have an offensive coordinator change on this team, and that might actually benefit Chris Godwin, because the Bucs went out and hired Liam Cohen, who spent 4 seasons with the Rams, and Sean McVay. And basically, I expect a similar offense as we saw last year in this team that was led by Dave Canales at the time, but only with a little bit more pre-snap motion and most likely putting Chris Godwin into the slot more, because that's what Liam Cohen did last year and in previous years with guys like Cooper Kupp, bigger slot receivers who have success there. And I think that's the first order of business for Cohen that he's going to notice pretty obviously coming in. And look, there's not really competition. The only guy they brought in, Jalen McMillan, a middle round rookie who I think is talented but not really going to push too much, and then Trey Palmer. Trey Palmer, an outside burner in his second year, had success last year. I think Palmer's going to move more to the slot or to the outside now instead of the slot. Godwin in the slot, and then Mike Evans on the outside as a 3 wide receiver set, and that's going to benefit honestly all these dudes. So as you can see right now, I'm massively ahead of the market, 2 rounds ahead of the market on Chris Godwin. He is my 49th overall player, so he makes my top 50 in the fantasy blueprint, which you can access, link down below. And he goes currently right now as the 73rd overall player, so I don't think you have to take him 2 rounds earlier, but if you take him a round or a half round earlier, you're still getting a massive value. And if you want to get that fantasy blueprint, I don't want to take up too much of your time. You just click the link in the description below, or we'll put a QR code on the screen in a second. You click get access, and then there's going to be 3 options for you to get it. 2 through our partners at a discounted rate and risk-free, and then the third way is the normal route, just in case you're not eligible for these ways. You can just check it out, link down below. Again, over 1,000 people have already signed up this year, and it's risk-free. If you don't make your fantasy playoffs, I just refund the $10 payment when you sign up through one of our partners. And look, last year only 3 people reached out for that refund. Of a couple thousand people signed up for the blueprint because they just found the tool probably useful, maybe they forgot, or they made their fantasy playoffs. So to get access to your blueprint right now for a limited time, risk-free, there's only a limited amount of risk-free spots. Just scan that QR code on the screen right now, or click the link in the description below. And the next guy who I believe is a must-have is going to be Jermaine Burton, who you can see right here. Jermaine Burton is a 3rd-round rookie on the Bengals, and as Cole Sullivan points out, he's seeing a lot of bright spots right now in camp. You can see here, and there's a big reason for this. First of all, he's actually a starting wide receiver already for the team, and the second reason, Jamar Chase and T. Higgins are missing from the Bengals OTAs because of contract issues. Jamar Chase is about to get paid a bag, as we're seeing a lot of wide receivers get paid this offseason, and T. Higgins is saying, screw you, you put me on the franchise tag, I'm not showing up to OTAs. So this is giving Jermaine Burton more opportunities with the first team offense, and specifically Joe Burrow, to get a lot of reps in. And if you're not familiar with his game, in 2022 and 2023, after transferring from Georgia, he went to Alabama, so 2 of the best teams you could play for in college, for work ethic, for organization, for just knowing how to play in an offense, and he led the team in receptions both of those years, and then receiving yards in both of those years. Now here's what he's best known for: his ability to stretch the field, as he ranked top 10 in deep targets last season. And coming out of college, he was compared to guys like Robert Woods and Calvin Ridley as prospects, and look, he landed in a quality offense with a good coach and a great quarterback and an instant starting opportunity, because Tyler Boyd is gone from this offense, so there's a spot open in the slot or 3 wide receiver sets for Jermaine Burton, who actually fell in the draft, fell to the 3rd round because of all field issues. There was a chance he was a 1st or 2nd round receiver without those. And I think immediately he's going to be the wide receiver 1 on this team. This clip that Josh Norris posted after the NFL draft of head coach Zach Taylor for the Bengals talking about Jermaine Burton, he lists Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and then Jermaine Burton as the points of the wide receivers in the offense before going on to list a couple of other depth receivers on the team. And he specifically points out that Burton can play all 3 wide receiver positions, which I agree. I don't think you could just put him in the Tyler Boyd role, because Tyler Boyd was not the type of athlete or downfield receiver that Jermaine Burton is. But if he sees the Tyler Boyd usage in terms of snaps in routes run, at the bare minimum, this is going to be great. Last year in that role, competing with T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, Tyler Boyd saw 98 targets. If you get 98 targets out of Jermaine Burton, where he's currently going in drafts, and I'll show you in a second, this season, that is going to be elite value. But keep in mind, like I said, it's not just going to be 98 targets out of the slot, the short to intermediate parts of the field. There'll be a lot more downfield targets, which lead to more upside in big weeks in fantasy. So Jermaine Burton, as you can see in the fantasy blueprint right now, currently goes as the 196th overall player in round 17. I'm about 21 spots higher, 2 rounds higher. He's my 175th overall player. This will only rise as we get more news out of training camp, OTAs in the preseason. This is just way too low for a starting wide receiver for Joe Burrow, who is extremely talented, was a #1 receiver for Alabama the past 2 years. So I believe as of right now, these are the must-have wide receivers for fantasy football. And again, this can change. We're in June as I release this, and there'll be more updates as the year goes on. But hey, fellas, if you enjoyed this video, you found value from it, do me a favor and be sure to check out the fantasy blueprint. Again, it is a risk-free offer. And if you enjoy that, let me know. If you have any questions or feedback, let me know as well. I appreciate you tuning in. And if you want to see the guys who are the must-have running backs this season, well, check out this lovely video right over here.